am Asha Dore, and I am one of the editors of Parley Lit, and this is Totally Biased Reviews. I'm here with
Ryan Rivas, the publisher of Burrow Press and the author of a couple books, most recently Lizard People or Lizard People.
I reread your book this morning and I really like it, and I still laughed out loud at the line, "This is above my pay grade," which is my favorite line.
Being
That
a broken therapist is, yeah.
relatable. You know, it's funny because I just read The Collected Schizophrenias that came out from Grey Wolf and
Mhm.
finished it right before I read Lizard People, and it was like so interesting because I'm like coming from this frame of delusions.
It's a good pairing.
I don't read captions before I read books, so I had no idea what your book was about, except that it was probably awesome because I grew up with people who believed in lizard people. So
Oh yeah. Ooh, I'm sorry.
there are worse things to believe
It's
in.
true. It's true. I have a couple of those in my family too, so.
Yeah. From Florida, right? Like
Yep.
grew up in Florida? Yeah. Yeah, that's what we do. So, would you like to blurb your book?
Yeah, so the book follows a nameless narrator who believes he is a lizard person. Um, and most of the story kind of takes place at this mandated therapy he is supposed to attend after an incident that happens at work. Um, so he finds himself at this resort style sort of therapy spa, kind of like in the how we used to maybe think of them, sanitariums or whatever. And once again, as he has several times in his life, being confronted by um, a therapist who is trying to convince him of his delusions. And again, he resists. I think in this particular book, there's a kind of analogy being made with lizard people. And I think there's enough hints as well as kind of a found document that appears in the story that hints at what it's really about, which is I think it's really about whiteness and what should happen to whiteness. And is it possible that we can have whiteness as an identity without white supremacy? But fun.
Super fun. I was really curious because of your piece that came out in Parley Lit, how that was going to tie in. That was a really neat surprise. And people listening to this, you should totally check that out because it's amazing.
Yeah, I appreciated the opportunity to kind of to record that, which I've been performing at readings as a kind of deleted scene or extended universe or whatever of the book. So I'm glad it has like a home now. It's in the archive.
Yeah, I think it's really great. And I really love the way that it expands the book. Okay, so tell me about your favorite scene or scenes in your book.
So the first scene that I wrote was the hypnosis scene, and I didn't know what the book was going to be about when I wrote it. I was just kind of had a conversation about hypnotherapy with somebody who had done it before, and that got me kind of free writing this scene. And you know, the mother with the claw became a lizard, became lizard people, because these are all things that were on my mind. And so that scene is important in that sense. But my favorite scene, I think, is something that I had wanted to write about for a long time, kind of a phenomena that happens in Miami in particular when it gets very cold, which is that when it gets to a certain temperature, when it drops below, I don't know, 40 degrees, iguanas start falling out of trees. I had that in some form as like a note in a notebook somewhere, like work this into a book or a story somehow. And so I think that's my favorite scene, or it must be, in the sense that I've been sitting on it for a long time, waiting for an excuse for it to make sense in a story or a book. And so obviously more happens around that, but that's something that happens in the book.
Yeah, I noticed that and I love that too. I really like anything that kind of calls to the really specific things that happen. I think only in Florida.
Yeah, and the iguanas, I don't even think were, they're a product of being brought elsewhere, right? So they're
Yeah.
this species that came from pet stores and pet owners who have let them go. And so yeah, there's the setting's not named in the book, so it's also a way to say that this book is set in Florida,
Hmm.
I think.
Yeah. And also the lines about the white sand beaches, which I think are to people who don't go to the beach regularly, they don't know that white beaches are kind of rare on the planet. It's so rare to find a beach that's actually got white sand. It's
Yeah, it's like, this isn't California, okay? Just get that straight. But
Yeah.
also, it's anywhere, I hope, maybe.
Hmm.
It's all taking place in the white imaginary. So,
Two books that I've read are totally different, but they're both kind of short little books, which I super love. Do you want to talk about the difference between writing those two books or any of your experiences around publishing?
well, the first one, Nextdoor in Colonialtown, which is photos of my neighborhood in Orlando, which is called Colonialtown, juxtaposed with found text from nextdoor.com, comments from Nextdoor. That kind of came about as a organically. I was taking these pictures, and then my friend, who's the publisher of Autofocus, asked if I wanted to, add text to them, if I could add text in some way. And so, anyway, it started to kind of take shape that way. So it started as a prompt, and it was very unexpected. And originally, it was just going to be for online. And then it became something else because I was like, I have like 50 of these things. And so it became a book. And so that's a really unexpected, it was an unexpected path to publication. I didn't conceive of it as a book. I had barely conceived of it at all. But Lizard People was something that was a little bit more traditional. I started drafting it, showed it to some friends, revised, showed it to some friends, etc. And then the trick was just to find a home for a book that is a strange length, like almost like too long to be a short story and just barely a novella maybe, or in the genre world what's called like a novelette. So in terms of thematic relations, though, I do think they're kind of part of a lineage, at least loosely, that has to do again with like whiteness and writing about making whiteness visible, thinking about how whiteness sees, and like critiquing that gaze and trying to understand it a little bit better, to name it, identify it, and then dismantle it, I guess, eventually is the goal. But in Nextdoor and Colonialtown, it's more on a communal level, like a neighborhood level, and in Lizard People, it's on this individual level, and it has more to do with specifically with denial.
Hmm. That makes sense to me. The things that I noticed that kind of like thrummed through both had to do with a lot of like skepticism and paranoia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I find that and thinking about it in terms of whiteness and like white ways of seeing the world, I think that's a really interesting thing because I think that the Karenism, and it's funny that one of your characters' name is Karen. I think that was
Mm-hmm.
excellent choice. Um, but that kind of thing seems to be really centered on like a very misinformed paranoia at the very least. I appreciated that because I think that that's something that we don't reflect on as often as we should. We white people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's there's a kind of inspirational quote that informs sort of the aesthetic of how I write about whiteness that comes from the philosopher George Yancey, who's kind of cited in that fake psychological paper that appears in the book, which is paraphrasing here, like white supremacy, which is an inverted epistemology, results in massive forms of hallucination. And so lizard people in particular, but also to some extent the other book too, that the paranoia found in both books comes from this sort of this warped white way of seeing the world.
Next door, I had like a lot to think about, even though, a lot of it is just really hilarious. Like the way that you collaged the comments against each other. I think it was really beautifully done. But I just thought a lot about how, in my own experiences with Nextdoor, I tend to dismiss this, but these are like real people who are just like constantly observing, judging, analyzing, and commenting on like the weirdest, most mundane things as if they are so important and like dangerous
Mm-hmm.
often.
Mm-hmm.
And how interesting that that's sort of the battle that people choose in their lives.
Yeah, and I find a lot of the funniest parts of that book to be not the most absurd, like did you get a gun or did you call the cops, but like the way that people who are writing on that platform are, I don't want to say self-important. They're trying to write to a higher level. So their grammar just comes through in this sort of like weird attempt at formality that creates interesting sentences that like has nothing to do with what they're saying, but like how they're saying it. Yeah, it's a lot. I don't recommend Nextdoor to people. And in fact, I borrowed someone's account to do the project, and then I haven't been back on since. And so, but people do send me comments now, sometimes unsolicited from Nextdoor, like, oh, these people in my neighborhood are posting about coyotes. And I was like, oh, okay.
So the way that you organize the book, focusing on the treatment sessions and then kind of putting in some history and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else to say about that?
Yeah, I think I just latched on to that. Like that was a pattern that was established early on, a kind of braiding or just a back and forth parallel narratives. And so I kind of latched onto it because it propelled me, and then I think it continued to work. So it wasn't anything special. It was just something where I guess I kind of got lucky in the early drafts that I was like, oh, I'm doing this. It's got a kind of momentum to it. I'm just going to keep doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really effective form. I like it a lot, and I like that it, you know, lends itself to like a deepening that is both completely linear and easy to read and also not linear at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's
No,
really nice.
thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how I did it.
I think that like my theory, and maybe this is like fucked up in some way that I can't see, but I just think that when you edit for a really long time and write for a really long time, you just sort of, it just like comes out of you sometimes. It's almost like a purge, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I definitely believe in intuition, um and I can, I think we've all been, or many of us have been doing it long enough to know when we're kind of on a roll and when we're stuck. Um and so and this was I was surprised pleasantly to not be as stuck on this piece as I am with several others. I know it's not working, and so I'm like having an existential crisis. And with this one, I was like, wow, this one's cruising. It's like it was very not normal for me.
Oh, why should people read your book?
Hmm. I'm not the person to ask that question to, because I would like them to, sincerely, please. I don't know. I think it's fun and it's quite short. Other people have said it's good, and someone else decided it was good enough to publish. So if you're interested in kind of like quirky, strange, absurd, weird books, I would like you to read it, please.
I agree with all of those things. I also think that it is so rare for books to even like use the word white or whiteness in a way that you can digest in story. I feel like we hear about white people being bad. We see white people doing all sorts of things, but people just don't talk about the fact of whiteness in a creative way. So I really
Hmm.
appreciate that because it's like a invitation to the conversation, and but it's also absurd, so you get to laugh and, you know, be
Yeah,
more
thank
comfortable.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's an entire canon of white literature in which whiteness is not named. So
It's
um,
amazing.
I've made it a project of mine, at least for the time being, to try to name it and deal with that.
Do you imagine a reader for the book?
Well, hopefully, white people in need of being converted to understanding themselves being racialized as white. Um, Although maybe that's the paradox of the book, is that someone who is far from the course of understanding their racialization is unlikely to maybe pick up on the analogy there. But actually, I've had a couple professors who've taught the book tell me about some students' reactions, and I found them interesting. Students who responded a little bit negatively or unsure. And so, I mean, I think it's a book for good white liberals to read. Also, I think it's for everyone as well, in that like it's aware of what it's doing, and so there's a comedy to it. It's not just a didactic kind of thing. I wrote this with the knowledge that that title could be provocative in that sense, because it is about, I mean, a couple of the characters in the book do believe in lizard people, in that sort of anti-Semitic tradition that I think it's still present, even if it's buried. A lot of just, your more traditional conspiracy theorists, your 9/11 truthers, your QAnons, they're not necessarily coming from a place of direct anti-Semitism, but it's still there. I think the anti-Semitism has looped back around in more obvious ways through, like, George Soros has become the sort of like scapegoat, like this Jewish man, and so it becomes a little bit more obvious at times. No, this is 100% about someone who comes from a family of white supremacists, like proud white supremacists, anti-Semites, etc. But I think the narrator's conception of lizard people is not is what's surprising about the book, and what makes it and his identity kind of complicated. but 100% it's rooted in that, and for that reason, because it is it has an anti-Semitic origin, and the characters, from which this whole thing originates are, yeah, like your garden variety white supremacists. So.
Mhm, mhm. Do you want to talk about who you'd cast in the TV show or movie of your book?
Oh, definitely. If any producers are listening, I had to think about this, and so I'm kind of thinking in a shameless way about this because, Saltburn is very. I have feelings about that film, but I really do feel like the lad who stars in Saltburn would make a good narrator, unnamed narrator. What's his Barry Keoghan or I don't know how you
Yeah.
Barry Keoghan.
I don't know. I've only read his name, like never heard
Yes,
of it.
same,
Mhm,
same.
mhm.
I mean, I love everything he's in. He's so fucking weird and amazing. So I think he'd be a good fit. And for the person who thinks he's a lizard person. And then I haven't really thought about who the therapist would be, but for Karen, at first I thought Jamie Lee Curtis might be a top choice, and I still think she is, but especially after her performance in Everything Everywhere All at Once. Is that what did I say that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Um,
Love
and
the
her or Kristen Stewart, because just to keep the total complete weirdness alive, Lizard
Yeah.
People, the movie slash miniseries, coming to a streaming service near you.
Okay, so is there anything else that you want to say about your book, about the press?
I'm always game for promoting Burrow Press more than my own work, because it's just in my nature. But yeah, if you haven't heard about Burrow Press, we've been around since 2010 doing cool shit. And we're coming up on 15 years. My goal next year is to have a quince for Burrow Press. And so, um, there'll be drunk uncles and salsa merengue and all kinds of things. And so, if you want to support that effort, you can check out our website, buy some of our books. We also have a subscription program where you can get all the books or sign up for all the books at once. And if you want, you can make that a recurring thing. Um, it all supports what we do, which is publishing weird shit that corporate publishers won't touch. So,
Yeah, I have been a subscriber and it's
yes,
great
you
because
have.
you get like a present that you don't expect. It's like,
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe other people are more aware of their own lives than I am, but I forget immediately what I have
Oh,
purchased for
absolutely.
myself.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful surprise.
Yeah, I frame it that way. It's like you're gonna forget you did it, but you're not gonna regret it.
I love the work that y'all publish. It's always good. It's always fun to when it pops up in my email to go investigate. So,
Yeah, thanks.
mhm. Do you want to do a reading of any part of your book?
Maybe I'll read the therapist said hypnosis would help me access memories as early as infancy. I lay on his couch in the dark office, eyes closed, overcome with feelings of warmth and serenity. As he counted down from 10, light seemed to flood the room, and when I opened my eyes, I was not supine on a therapist's couch, but staring at the mobile in my childhood bedroom. Stars and birds and cotton ball clouds hung from string and spun in slow circles. I brought language with me to describe these objects that, at 6 months old, I could have only absorbed as shapes and colors, sounds and smells. Mother's song drifted down the hallway, crisp and clear. Blossom of snow, may you bloom and grow. The smell of bacon in the kitchen. Morning. The morning light dappled on the ceiling, interrupted by Mother's pale face, so young and free of wrinkles, her blue eyes specked with black flakes. She reached into the crib to lift me, her long fingers outstretched and tipped with dark claws.
Thank you.
Thank
Um,
you for having me.